After turning 70, I finally bought a small beach house for myself. But I didn't tell anyone that I had signed up for an at-home security system. On my first night there, the alarm went off. When I went out to check, no one was there, but I found something that made me panic. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. I turned 70 last March, and for the first time in my life, I did something entirely for myself. I bought a beach house. Not a grand estate, mind you, just a modest 2-bedroom cottage in Seabrook, a quiet town on the Washington coast where the fog rolls in thick each morning, and the gulls cry like they're mourning something lost. The kind of place where you can finally hear yourself think. My late husband, Thomas, always talked about retiring by the ocean. We'd spent 42 years saying someday, and then one Tuesday afternoon, his heart simply stopped while he was pruning the rose bushes in our Portland backyard. That was 3 years ago. Our son, Michael, swooped in immediately, full of concern and arrangements, his wife Rebecca always hovering at his elbow with that worried crease between her perfectly shaped eyebrows. "Mom, you shouldn't be alone," Michael had said at the funeral, gripping my hand too tightly. "We have that guest room. You could stay with us." But I'd declined. Politely, as I always do. I'd spent enough time in their modern glass house in Lake Oswego, watching Rebecca orchestrate every moment of their lives with the precision of a symphony conductor. She meant well, I told myself. She was just particular. The beach house transaction happened quickly. I'd saved money over the years. Thomas had been a practical man, and we'd lived modestly. I didn't tell Michael or Rebecca about the purchase until after the papers were signed. When I finally mentioned it during Sunday dinner at their house, Rebecca's fork paused halfway to her mouth. A beach house? She recovered quickly, that practiced smile sliding into place. "How spontaneous of you, Dorothy." "It's small," I said, passing the green beans. "Just somewhere peaceful." "But Mom," Michael interjected, his voice taking on that concerned tone he'd adopted since becoming the man of our family. "Have you thought about the maintenance? The distance? What if something happens?" "I'm 70, dear, not infirm." I kept my voice gentle but firm. "And it's only 2 hours away." Rebecca set down her fork entirely. "Of course, Dorothy. We just worry. You know how much we care about your well-being." Her fingers reached across the table, touching my wrist briefly. That's when I'd first noticed her perfume. An unusual scent I'd had custom blended for her last birthday. Bergamot and white tea with just a hint of jasmine. $300 at that boutique fragrance shop in downtown Portland. She'd seemed so delighted when she opened it. "I actually wanted to discuss something," Rebecca continued, exchanging a glance with Michael. "Your house in Portland. It's so much space for one person. Have you considered that it might be time to—" "I'm keeping it," I said, more sharply than intended. Then, softer. "I'm not ready to let go of everything Thomas and I built." The dinner had ended cordially enough, but I caught Rebecca and Michael whispering in the kitchen as I gathered my coat. I pretended not to notice. That was 6 weeks ago. Yesterday, I'd finally moved into the beach house, a Tuesday in late April when the spring storms had temporarily cleared. The movers had left by 4 o'clock, and I'd spent the evening unpacking my grandmother's dishes and hanging Thomas's favorite painting of Mount Hood in the living room. The house smelled of salt air and fresh paint. Perfect. What no one knew, not Michael, not Rebecca, not even my sister Patricia in Spokane, was that I'd also installed a complete ADT home security system. The technician, a friendly young man named Brandon, had spent most of Monday setting it up. "Living alone by the beach?" he'd said, testing the window sensors. "Smart to have this. Remote area like this, you want protection." I hadn't mentioned it to Michael because I knew he'd make a fuss, turn it into evidence that I was afraid, that I shouldn't be living alone. But I wasn't afraid. I was simply practical. Thomas had always praised my practicality. My first night in the house, I went to bed around 10 o'clock, lulled by the distant sound of waves. The security system was armed, all the windows locked, both doors secured. I felt safe, peaceful, even. The alarm's shriek ripped through the silence at 2:47 a.m. My heart hammered as I grabbed my robe, my hands shaking as I fumbled for the bedside lamp. The control panel in the hallway showed a breach, the back door leading to the small deck overlooking the beach. I grabbed my phone, my finger hovering over 911, but something made me hesitate. The alarm was already scaring off whoever it was. I could see through my bedroom window that the motion sensor floodlights had blazed to life in the backyard. If someone was out there, they were caught in that harsh white glare. I crept down the hallway, clutching my phone like a weapon. The ADT monitoring service called within seconds. "Mrs. Norton, this is ADT security. We show a breach at your back entrance. Are you safe? Do you need police dispatch?" I don't know," I whispered. "I'm checking now." "Ma'am, please don't approach." But I was already at the back door, peering through the window. The deck was empty. The door stood slightly ajar, moving in the wind, but I knew I'd locked it. I'd checked twice. "There's no one here," I told the operator, my voice steadier now. "The door is open, but whoever it was must have run off. I'm dispatching local police anyway, Mrs. Norton. Please stay inside and keep your phone with you." I agreed, and ended the call, but I couldn't stop myself from stepping onto the deck. The floodlights still blazed. The beach stretched out below, silvered by moonlight, completely deserted. No footprints in the sand leading away. No figure disappearing into the fog. But then the wind shifted, and I smelled it. Bergamot and white tea. Jasmine. Rebecca's perfume. The one I'd given her. The one I'd had specially made, unique and unreplicatable. My blood turned to ice. I backed into the house, my mind racing. No, it couldn't be. Why would Rebecca be here? How would she even know where? I stopped mid-thought. Michael. I'd given him the address, of course. He was my son. But I'd been so careful not to mention when I'd be moving in, or that I was spending my first night here alone. The police arrived within 20 minutes. A young deputy named Martinez, who checked the perimeter and found nothing. No signs of forced entry, though he noted the door lock seemed intact. "Sometimes these older locks just spring open," he said sympathetically. "Ocean air corrodes everything out here. I'd get a deadbolt installed." I thanked him and didn't mention the perfume. How could I? It sounded absurd even in my own mind. Besides, scent is subjective, easily dismissed. The deputy would think me a paranoid old woman. After he left, I locked every door and window, checked them 3 times, and sat in my kitchen drinking chamomile tea until the sun rose. I didn't sleep. I couldn't shake that smell from my memory, or the impossible questions it raised. Why would Rebecca come here in the middle of the night? Why not just knock? And if she'd wanted to check on me, why run away when the alarm sounded? Unless she hadn't come to check on me at all. At 7:30 a.m., exhausted but wired with nervous energy, I began looking through the house more carefully. Everything seemed in place. The movers had stacked the remaining boxes in the spare bedroom, mostly Thomas's things I hadn't been ready to sort through. Old files from his accounting practice, photo albums, memorabilia. One box had been opened. Just barely. The tape pulled back and loosely repositioned, as if someone had tried to make it look undisturbed. But I knew. I'd sealed every box myself with that strong packing tape, folding the edges precisely. My hands trembled as I pulled the flaps open. The box contained Thomas's files from the last years of his practice, before his retirement. Client folders, tax documents, financial records he'd been too meticulous to throw away. Everything appeared to be there, nothing missing that I could tell. But on top of the stack sat a manila folder I didn't recognize. The tab read simply, Patterson Family Trust, Private. I'd never seen this folder before. Thomas had handled our finances, but we'd never had anything called a family trust. We'd had wills, of course, and some modest investments, but nothing that required this kind of formal documentation. I opened it with shaking fingers. The first document was dated 8 years ago. A trust agreement establishing something called the Patterson Coastal Property Trust. My signature was on it. Thomas's signature, and 2 witnesses I'd never heard of. But I'd never signed this document. I'd never even seen it. As I read further, my confusion turned to cold dread. According to this trust, Thomas and I had purchased a property. This exact beach house, 8 years ago. We'd held it in trust, with specific instructions that upon Thomas's death, it would transfer to Michael, with Rebecca named as co-trustee. But that was impossible. We'd never owned this house. I'd bought it 6 weeks ago. I had the deed, the mortgage papers, the closing documents, didn't I? My phone rang, making me jump. Michael's name flashed on the screen. Mom? Just checking in. How was your first night? I stared at the document in my hands, at the signature that looked exactly like mine but couldn't be. Fine, I heard myself say. It was fine, dear. Rebecca wanted me to call. She's worried about you being out there all alone. She thinks maybe we should come visit this weekend. Make sure you're settling in okay. Through the window, I could see the morning fog rolling across the beach. In my hands, I held evidence of a crime I couldn't understand. And somewhere in the pre-dawn darkness, my daughter-in-law had been in this house, searching through my dead husband's files. Actually, I said slowly, that would be lovely. I'd like to talk to you both about something. I heard Rebecca's voice in the background, too muffled to make out words. Then Michael again. Great. We'll come Saturday. And Mom? Rebecca says to make sure you're locking all your doors. You can never be too careful. After he hung up, I sat in the growing daylight, that impossible document in my lap, and realized with absolute certainty that I'd stumbled into something far more dangerous than a simple break-in. Someone had forged documents in my name. Someone had been in my house, searching for these very papers. And that someone wore a perfume only one person in the world possessed. I had 4 days before Michael and Rebecca arrived. 4 days to figure out what Thomas had hidden from me, why these forged documents existed, and what my daughter-in-law was really after. The beach house I'd bought for peace had become the center of a mystery I didn't yet understand. But I would. Because if there's one thing 7 decades of life had taught me, it's that secrets buried deep don't stay buried forever. They rise, eventually, like bodies in the tide. I didn't sleep Wednesday night either. Instead, I sat at Thomas's old desk, the one I'd insisted the movers bring from Portland, and spread out every document from that manila folder. The trust agreement, property deeds, transfer documents, bank statements showing payments for a property I'd never known existed, all dated 8 years ago, all bearing signatures that looked exactly like mine and Thomas's, but we'd never signed these papers. I would have remembered purchasing a beach house. We'd talked about it endlessly, but never pulled the trigger. Thomas always said we'd wait until his practice slowed down, until we'd saved just a bit more. So how had someone created such perfect forgeries? I photographed every page with my phone, saved them to a cloud storage account I'd created years ago, but rarely used. Then I hid the originals inside my grandmother's old recipe box, tucked between cards for her famous lemon cake and pot roast. Nobody would think to look there. Thursday morning, I called my lawyer, or rather, the lawyer who'd handled our wills. Martin Whitaker had worked with Thomas for 20 years, a solid man with a reputation for honesty. His secretary said he was in court all day, but could see me Friday at 2 o'clock. It's somewhat urgent, I told her. Is everything all right, Mrs. Norton? I'm not sure yet. That's what I need to find out. After hanging up, I made coffee and stood at my kitchen window, watching the tide come in. The beach was empty except for a man walking a golden retriever. Normal, peaceful, nothing like the churning in my stomach. My phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. Thinking of you. Michael and I are so excited for this weekend. Need us to bring anything? I stared at the message. She'd been in my house Tuesday night. I was certain. But why? What had she been looking for? And more importantly, had she found it? Just yourselves, I typed back. See you Saturday. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, actually, I was thinking, maybe we should come today instead. I have a free afternoon and I'd love to help you unpack. Plus, we could grab an early dinner in town. My heart rate kicked up. She wanted to come now, before I could meet with Martin Whitaker, before I could make sense of these documents. That's sweet, but I'm actually heading to Portland for a doctor's appointment. I lied. Won't be back until late. Saturday is better. A longer pause this time. Then, Doctor? Is everything okay? Just routine. Nothing to worry about. Okay. See you Saturday. Love you. I set down the phone with shaking hands. I'd never lied easily, not in 70 years. But something about Rebecca's eagerness felt wrong. Predatory, even. By 10 o'clock, I'd decided I couldn't wait until Friday to start digging. I drove into Seabrook proper, really just a main street with a grocery store, post office, and cluster of small businesses. The county recorder's office was housed in a pale blue building that also contained the library. The clerk, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and graying hair pulled into a bun, looked up as I entered. "Help you find something?" "I hope so. I need to look up the ownership history for a property." I gave her my beach house address. She typed into her computer, fingers flying across the keys. "Okay, let me pull that up. You're the new owner, right? I processed that transfer last month." "Yes, but I'm curious about the previous ownership." Her eyes scanned the screen. "Let's see. You purchased from Coastal Realty Trust Corporation. Before that, the property was held by..." "Huh. What?" "Well, according to this, the Coastal Realty Trust Corporation acquired it 8 years ago from a Norton family trust." She looked up at me. "Any relation?" My mouth went dry. That's my last name. Small world." She smiled. "Want me to pull the deed records?" "Please." She disappeared into a back room and returned with a folder containing photocopies. I spread them on the counter, my hands trembling slightly. There it was. 8 years ago, Thomas and Dorothy Norton had transferred ownership of the beach house to the Norton Family Trust. 2 years later, the trust had sold it to Coastal Realty Trust Corporation. Then last month, I'd purchased it from that corporation. We'd owned this house, then we'd sold it, then I'd bought it back. Except I had no memory of any of it. "Ma'am, you okay? You look pale." "I'm fine. Could I get copies of all of these?" "Sure thing. Give me a few minutes." While she worked, I stepped outside to catch my breath. The spring air was crisp, tinged with salt. A few locals passed by, nodding politely. Everything looked so normal. But nothing was normal. My phone rang. Michael. "Hey, Mom. Rebecca told me about your doctor's appointment. Why didn't you mention it? Is something wrong?" I closed my eyes. Of course Rebecca had told him. "It's nothing, dear. Just a checkup. At your age, you should tell us about these things. We worry. I know you do." I kept my voice steady. "But I'm fine, really." "Okay. Well, listen, I actually wanted to ask you something. That house in Portland, have you thought any more about what Rebecca suggested, about possibly selling?" There it was. The real reason for the call. "Michael, I've told you, I'm not ready to sell your father's house." I know. But Mom, be practical. You're living at the beach now. That's a lot of property to maintain from 2 hours away. And the market is really strong right now. Rebecca's been doing some research, and she thinks we could get... We? The word came out sharper than I intended. A pause. "Well, eventually it'll be mine anyway, right? I'm just trying to help you make smart decisions while I still have my faculties." I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. "I'm 70, not senile." "That's not what I meant." His tone shifted, became placating. "I'm just saying, Rebecca has a good head for these things. She's been looking into your finances and she thinks..." "She's been looking into my finances?" Ice flooded my veins. I didn't give her permission to do that. "Mom, calm down. She's family. She's only trying to help. You know you're not great with numbers, and since Dad died, your father taught me everything I needed to know about our finances." My voice shook now, but not from fear, from anger. "And I certainly don't need Rebecca poking through my private affairs." Silence on the other end. Then, carefully, "Are you sure you're feeling okay? You sound stressed. Maybe living alone isn't..." "I'm perfectly fine. I'll see you Saturday." I hung up before he could respond. My hands were trembling. Rebecca had been looking into my finances. How? Through what right? And more importantly, what had she found? The clerk emerged with my copies. I paid and drove back to the beach house, my mind spinning. Once inside, I locked every door and window, then pulled out my bank statements, investment accounts, everything Thomas had left organized in his filing cabinet back in Portland. But I didn't have those files here. They were all in Portland, in Thomas's study, where Rebecca could access them if she wanted, if she and Michael went to the house while I was away. I called my neighbor in Portland, Mrs. Kowalski. She'd lived next door for 15 years. Dorothy, how's the beach treating you? Wonderful, Margaret. Listen, I have a favor to ask. Could you keep an eye on my house this week? I'm worried about break-ins. Of course, dear. Though this is such a safe neighborhood. I know. I'm probably being silly. But if you see anyone there, even Michael, would you mind calling me? Michael? Your son? Yes. He's been talking about checking on things, but I'd rather be there when he does. Old mother paranoia. I forced a laugh. I understand completely. I'll keep watch. After hanging up, I spent the rest of Thursday afternoon going through Thomas's other boxes, searching for anything else that seemed out of place. I found old tax returns, client files from his accounting practice, birthday cards I'd saved over the years, and then, tucked inside a folder labeled Personal 1994, I found a letter. It was addressed to Thomas, postmarked 12 years ago from a law firm in Seattle I'd never heard of. Cooper, Keller and Associates. The letterhead was expensive-looking, heavy stock with embossed lettering. Dear Mr. Norton, per our phone conversation, I'm enclosing the documents we discussed regarding the coastal property matter. As you requested, these have been prepared with the utmost discretion. The secondary trust structure should provide the protection you're seeking. Please remember that the arrangement we discussed requires absolute confidentiality. Should your wife make inquiries, refer her to me directly. The retainer you provided covers our services for the next 5 years. After that, we'll need to discuss renewal. Regards, Roy Cooper Esquern. I read it 3 times. Thomas had hired a lawyer I'd never heard of, for a coastal property matter, with instructions to keep it confidential from me. My husband, my honest, straightforward, meticulous husband, had hidden something from me. Something involving this beach house. Something that required lawyers and secret trusts and discretion. The betrayal cut deeper than I'd expected. Thomas and I had shared everything, or so I'd thought. I was still holding the letter when my phone rang again. Unknown number. Hello? Mrs. Norton? This is Detective Lauren Wade with the Seabrook Police Department. Deputy Martinez filed a report about the incident at your home Tuesday night. I have a few follow-up questions. Would now be a good time? My throat tightened. Of course. Great. I'm actually in the area. Would you mind if I stopped by? Say, in about 10 minutes? 10 minutes. Not enough time to hide everything, to prepare, to think. That's fine, I heard myself say. I'd barely returned the letter to its folder when headlights swept across my front window. A plain sedan pulled into my driveway. A woman in her 40s, athletic build, dark hair pulled back, climbed out. I opened the door before she could knock. Mrs. Norton, I'm Detective Wade. She showed me her badge. Thanks for making time. Of course. Please come in. She entered with the casual alertness of someone trained to notice everything. Her eyes swept the room, taking in the boxes, the furniture, the security keypad by the door. Nice place. Just moved in? Tuesday. That was my first night here. Right. She pulled out a small notebook. Deputy Martinez mentioned the alarm went off around 2:47 a.m. Back door. But no signs of forced entry. That's correct. And you didn't see anyone? No. By the time I got there, whoever it was had gone. Whoever it was. She looked up from her notes. So you think someone was actually here? Not just a malfunction? I hesitated. This was the moment to mention the perfume, the opened box, the documents. But something held me back. Maybe it was the way she was watching me, professionally sympathetic, but with an undertone of skepticism that suggested she already thought I was a paranoid elderly woman. I don't know, I said carefully. The door was definitely open. Old houses by the ocean. Locks fail all the time. Salt air, moisture. She smiled reassuringly. Still, better safe than sorry. That's a good security system you installed. Thank you. When did you have it put in? Monday. Her pen paused. The day before the incident? Yes. Is that significant? Just noting the timeline. She scribbled something. And you live alone? I'm a widow. Any family in the area? My son lives in Lake Oswego, about 2 hours away. Does he have a key to this place? The question felt loaded. No. Why? Just wondering if anyone else might have legitimate access. Anyone who might trigger the alarm accidentally. She looked around again. You mentioned to Deputy Martinez that nothing was missing? Not that I could tell. And you're certain the door was locked before you went to bed? Positive. Detective Wade closed her notebook. Well, Mrs. Norton, I'll be honest. We don't have much to go on here. No evidence of forced entry, nothing stolen, no witnesses. Could have been kids, could have been the wind. Hard to say. Kids? I kept my voice neutral. We get teenagers sometimes, messing around in the empty beach houses. Probably saw your lights on. Didn't realize anyone had moved in. Got spooked when the alarm went off. She handed me her card. But if anything else happens, anything at all, you call me directly, okay? After she left, I stood in my kitchen and realized what had just happened. The detective had already decided this was nothing. An overreaction by a nervous old woman in a new house. Which meant if something else happened, if Rebecca came back, if this situation escalated, I was on my own. I looked at the documents spread across Thomas's desk. The forged trust agreement, the letter from the Seattle lawyer, the property records showing transactions I didn't remember. Saturday, Michael and Rebecca would arrive. They'd ask questions, probe gently, try to determine how much I knew, and I'd have to sit across from my daughter-in-law and pretend I didn't know she'd been in this house, searching through my belongings, hunting for something in Thomas's files. I had less than 48 hours to find out what that something was, and to figure out why my dead husband had hidden a beach house from me for 8 years. Friday morning arrived with bruised clouds and the promise of rain. I'd managed perhaps 3 hours of sleep, plagued by dreams of Thomas signing documents while Rebecca watched from the shadows, smiling. My appointment with Martin Whitaker was at 2 o'clock. I had the morning to prepare, to organize my thoughts and questions. But first, I needed to do something I'd been avoiding. I needed to call the law firm in Seattle. Cooper, Keller, and Associates. The letterhead was 12 years old, but law firms tended to be stable. I found their website easily enough, a sleek, modern design that screamed expensive. Roy Cooper was listed as senior partner, specializing in estate planning and asset protection. I dialed before I could lose my nerve. Cooper, Keller, and Associates. How may I direct your call? Roy Cooper, please. My name is Dorothy Norton. A brief pause. One moment. Classical music filled the line. I waited, my heart hammering. Then a male voice, smooth and professional. Mrs. Norton, I wondered if I'd hear from you eventually. The words stopped me cold. You were expecting my call? Not expecting exactly, but not surprised. It's been, 3 years since Thomas passed? I assume you've started going through his papers. My hands tightened on the phone. Mr. Cooper, I need to understand what's going on. I found a letter you sent my husband 12 years ago. About a coastal property. About keeping things confidential from me. A long sigh. Mrs. Norton, I'm bound by attorney-client privilege, even after a client's death. I can't discuss the specifics of what Thomas and Someone forged my signature on trust documents, I said, my voice harder than I'd ever heard it. Documents related to this property. That's fraud, Mr. Cooper. And if your firm was involved... Stop right there. His tone sharpened. I never forged anything. Thomas came to me with a legitimate legal matter. Everything I did was above board and at his explicit instruction. Then tell me what he asked you to do. Another pause. Then, carefully, has anyone else contacted you about this? Your family, perhaps? The question sent ice through my veins. Why would my family contact me about this? Mrs. Norton, I think you should come to Seattle. Today, if possible. There are things I can show you in person that I can't discuss over the phone. Documents Thomas left in my care with specific instructions about when and how they should be released. Released to whom? To you. But only if certain conditions were met. What conditions? That's what we need to discuss in person. Can you be here by 5 o'clock? I looked at my watch. It was 9:30. Seattle was 3 hours away, and I had my appointment with Martin Whitaker at 2. But something in Cooper's voice told me this was urgent. That time was running out. I'll be there, I said. Good. And Mrs. Norton? Come alone. Don't tell anyone you're making this trip. He hung up before I could ask why. I sat in my kitchen, staring at the phone. Don't tell anyone. The same instruction Thomas had given Cooper about me, apparently. Everyone keeping secrets, layering deception upon deception. I called Martin Whitaker's office and rescheduled for Monday, claiming a family emergency. Then I grabbed my purse, checked that the recipe box with the hidden documents was secure, and headed to my car. The drive to Seattle felt eternal. Rain started an hour in, turning the highway into a slick gray ribbon. I kept checking my rearview mirror, though I couldn't say what I was looking for. Evidence I was being followed? Paranoia was becoming my constant companion. Cooper, Keller, and Associates occupied the top floor of a glass tower in downtown Seattle. The receptionist, a polished woman in her 20s, led me to a corner office with views of Elliott Bay. Roy Cooper stood as I entered, a distinguished man in his 60s with silver hair and expensive glasses. "Mrs. Norton, thank you for coming. Thank you for seeing me on such short notice." He gestured to a leather chair across from his massive mahogany desk. "I've been dreading this conversation for 3 years, ever since I heard about Thomas's passing. You knew my husband well?" "We met at a conference in Portland about 15 years ago. He was brilliant with numbers, very thorough. When he came to me with his situation, I understood why he felt he needed help." "What situation?" Cooper opened a drawer and pulled out a thick file. "Before we begin, I need to ask you some questions. Standard verification. What was your mother's maiden name?" I told him. He asked 3 more questions. Details only I would know. Satisfied, he opened the file. 12 years ago, Thomas came to me in a state of considerable distress. He'd discovered something troubling about someone close to your family, someone he felt posed a potential threat to your financial security. My mouth went dry. "Who?" "Your daughter-in-law, Rebecca." The name hung in the air between us. I'd known, somehow, that this would lead back to her, but hearing it confirmed made it real. Thomas ran a background check on Rebecca when Michael first started dating her. This was before they got engaged. He didn't tell you because he didn't want to seem paranoid or controlling. A background check? Why would he? Because something didn't add up. Rebecca claimed to be from a wealthy Portland family, old money, but Thomas couldn't verify any of it. Her family history was murky. Cooper pulled out a document and slid it across the desk. A private investigator's report, dated 13 years ago. I scanned the pages, my hands shaking. Rebecca's real name was Rebecca Hartley. She'd grown up in Tacoma, not Portland. Her parents weren't wealthy. Her father had been a used car salesman who'd died in prison for fraud, and her mother had disappeared when Rebecca was 16. She changed her name 7 years before she met Michael, Cooper continued. Legally. She constructed an entire false identity, complete with a fabricated family background. The investigator found evidence she'd done this before, taken on different identities in different cities. Why? The word came out as a whisper. The investigator believed she was a con artist, someone who targeted wealthy families, married into them, and then systematically extracted money. He found 2 previous instances, one in California, one in Arizona. Both times she married men from well-off families. Both times she disappeared after gaining access to family assets. I felt sick. Michael has no idea? Thomas wanted to tell him, but the investigator warned that confronting Rebecca directly might push her to escalate her timeline, to take what she could and disappear before anyone could stop her. So Thomas decided on a different approach. "The beach house," I said slowly. "Exactly. Thomas knew that you and he didn't have vast wealth, but you had assets. Your Portland home, his retirement accounts, your savings. Rebecca would eventually gain access to all of it through Michael." Cooper pulled out another document, the trust agreement I'd found. Thomas created a hidden asset. He purchased this beach house 8 years ago without telling Rebecca or Michael. He put it in a trust structure that made it invisible to casual financial investigation. Then he sold it to a shell corporation he controlled, making it look like you'd never owned it at all. "But I found these papers, the forged trust documents." "Not forged," Cooper interrupted. "You did sign them, Dorothy. Thomas brought you here to my office 8 years ago. We met for about 2 hours. We discussed the beach house, the trust, everything. I stared at him. That's impossible. I would remember. You had a medical procedure that year. Do you remember? In the fall, about a week before Thanksgiving? The room tilted slightly. I did remember. A colonoscopy. Routine screening. They'd put me under anesthesia. Thomas scheduled our meeting for the same day as your procedure. You were still groggy from the anesthesia when he brought you here. We explained everything. You signed the papers, and then Thomas took you home. He told me later that by the next morning you had no memory of the meeting at all. A side effect of the anesthesia, temporary short-term memory loss. Horror washed over me. Thomas had taken advantage of my medically induced confusion to make me sign documents I wouldn't remember, to create a secret I'd never know existed. The plan was this, Cooper continued, his voice gentle but firm. Thomas would keep the beach house hidden. If Rebecca's pattern held, she'd eventually show her true colors, probably after gaining access to your primary assets. When that happened, you'd still have the beach house, a safety net, somewhere to go, an asset she couldn't touch. But Thomas died before any of that happened. Yes, and that created a complication. The beach house was sitting in the Shell Corporation, but you didn't know about it. So I executed the next phase of Thomas's plan. I arranged for the property to be sold back to you through a real estate agent, at market value, using your own money, so everything appeared legitimate. You thought you were buying a new property, but you were actually reacquiring something you'd owned all along. My head spun. The deed, the closing documents, all legitimate. I made sure of it. Thomas wanted you to have this house, but he wanted it to look like a normal transaction so Rebecca wouldn't question it. But she knows, I said. She broke into my house. She was looking for these documents. Cooper's expression darkened. How do you know she broke in? I told him about the alarm, the perfume, the opened box. His face grew graver with each detail. This is worse than I thought. Thomas predicted she might make a move after his death, but I'd hoped we'd have more time. He pulled out his phone. I need to show you something else. Something the investigator found recently. I've been continuing to monitor Rebecca's activities since Thomas passed. He pulled up a series of photographs on his phone. Rebecca meeting with a man in a coffee shop. Rebecca at what looked like a lawyer's office. Rebecca examining documents in what appeared to be a bank. This is from 2 months ago, around the time you started looking at beach properties. How would she know I was... She's been monitoring your accounts, Dorothy. Probably through Michael. She knew you were planning something, making a large purchase, and she needed to know what. He swiped to another photo. Rebecca walking into a building I recognized, the county recorder's office in Seabrook, the same place I'd visited yesterday. She's been tracing the property history, trying to figure out the connection between you and the beach house. And based on what you've told me, she's found something. Maybe not everything, but enough to know there's money hidden somewhere. What does she want? Cooper set down his phone and looked at me directly. Everything, Dorothy. Your Portland house, your savings, your investments. She's been working on Michael for years, slowly turning him against the idea of you living independently, making him think you're not capable of handling your own affairs. I thought of Michael's phone calls, his concerns about me living alone, Rebecca's suggestions about selling the Portland house. It all clicked into place. She wants me declared incompetent, I whispered, or at least marginalized enough that Michael gains control of your assets. Then she controls Michael, so she controls everything. The beach house threw her off because it wasn't in any of the financial records she could access. So she broke in, searching for proof of what Thomas had hidden. What do I do? Cooper pulled out a final document from the file. Thomas left instructions for this exact scenario. If Rebecca discovered the beach house and began actively threatening you, I was to give you this. He handed me a sealed envelope with my name written in Thomas's handwriting. My eyes filled with tears at the sight of it. His precise, careful script. Read it here, Cooper said softly. Take your time. My hands shook as I opened the envelope and unfolded the letter inside. My dearest Dorothy, if you're reading this, then I've failed you. I'm gone, and you've discovered the secret I never wanted to keep from you. I can only imagine how betrayed you must feel, and I'm so profoundly sorry. I did this because I love you, because I couldn't bear the thought of you being left vulnerable after I was gone. Rebecca is dangerous, though I pray I'm wrong about her. I pray that by the time you read this, she's proven me paranoid and Michael is happily married to a woman who truly loves him. But if I'm right, if she's shown her true nature, then please forgive me for these deceptions. The beach house is yours, free and clear. All the documentation is legitimate. It's worth about $400,000, and it's safe from any claims Michael or Rebecca might make on your estate. There's more. In a safe deposit box at First National Bank in Portland, you'll find additional documents, evidence of Rebecca's past, her real identity, everything the investigator found. Use these if you need to protect yourself. The key is taped inside your grandmother's recipe box, behind the index card for her apple pie. I spent 42 years loving you, Dorothy. You are the strongest, wisest person I've ever known. Trust your instincts. Trust your intelligence. You'll know what to do. All my love. Always, Thomas. I sat there, tears streaming down my face, holding my husband's final message. He'd been protecting me, even from beyond the grave. Yes, he'd deceived me. Yes, he'd manipulated me into signing papers I wouldn't remember. But he'd done it out of love, out of desperate fear for my safety. There's one more thing, Cooper said quietly. The investigator found something 2 weeks ago. Rebecca has been in contact with her previous victims, the families from California and Arizona. It appears she's done this successfully at least 4 times. Each time she extracts between $500,000 and $1 million before disappearing. But she's still with Michael. Because you're still alive, she can't fully access your assets while you're living and competent. But if something were to happen to you, if you had an accident or were declared unable to care for yourself, Michael would inherit everything, and Rebecca would be right there to help him manage it. The implications crashed over me like a wave. You think she'd hurt me? I think she's desperate. She's invested years in this con, and you're the only obstacle standing between her and a significant payday. Be careful, Dorothy. Very careful. I left Cooper's office as the rain intensified, my mind reeling. I had evidence now, proof of Rebecca's true identity, her history, her plans. But I also had a problem. If I confronted her directly, she'd know I'd discovered everything, and a cornered predator was the most dangerous kind. I was halfway to my car when my phone rang. Michael. Mom, where are you? I've been calling all day. I'm in Seattle. I had some errands. Seattle? Why didn't you tell me? And why haven't you been answering? We've been worried sick. He meant Rebecca. My phone was on silent. I'm sorry, dear. Well, listen. There's been a change of plans. Rebecca and I are actually at your beach house right now. We decided to surprise you. We brought groceries for dinner and everything. But you're not here. My blood turned to ice. They were at my house. Right now, with full access to everything inside. I'll be home in a few hours, I managed to say. Great. We'll wait for you. Drive safe. The roads are getting bad. After he hung up, I stood in the parking garage, rain echoing off concrete, and realized the trap had been set. Rebecca was in my house, searching for the evidence she needed, and I was 3 hours away, unable to stop her. Whatever she found, whatever she was looking for, she'd have it long before I made it home. I drove through the rain like a woman possessed, my hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. 3 hours. Rebecca had 3 hours to tear my house apart, to find the documents I'd hidden, to discover what Thomas had left for me. The recipe box. Thomas's letter had mentioned it. The safe deposit key was taped inside, behind the apple pie recipe card, but the original trust documents were also in that box. If Rebecca found them, she'd know I'd discovered everything. My phone rang again. This time an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Mrs. Norton, this is Margaret Kowalski. Your neighbor in Portland? My stomach dropped. Margaret, is everything all right? Well, I'm not sure. You asked me to watch your house, and I've been keeping an eye out like I promised. But about an hour ago, I saw someone going in through your back door. A woman, I think. She had a key, so I assumed it was family. But then I remembered what you said about wanting to know if anyone was there. What did she look like? Tall, dark hair, very put together, wearing expensive-looking clothes. Rebecca. She'd sent Michael to the beach house as a distraction while she went to Portland to search my home there. They were working together, coordinating their attack. Margaret, call the police. Right now. Tell them there's an intruder in my house. But if she has a key, she doesn't have my permission to be there. Please, Margaret, it's urgent. Of course, dear. I'll call right away. I hung up and immediately dialed Michael. He answered on the first ring. Hey, Mom. How much longer? Rebecca's making her famous lasagna. Michael, where's Rebecca right now? A pause. What do you mean? She's right here, in the kitchen. Put her on the phone. Mom, what's going on? You sound strange. Put her on. Muffled sounds. Then Rebecca's voice, smooth as silk. Dorothy, is everything okay? Mrs. Kowalski just saw you breaking into my Portland house. Silence. Then, carefully, I think your neighbor is confused. I'm at your beach house with Michael. I've been here for over an hour. Then who's in my Portland house right now? Who has a key to my back door? I have no idea. Maybe you should call the police if you're concerned. Her tone was perfectly reasonable, perfectly innocent. Dorothy, are you feeling all right? You sound very stressed. Don't patronize me. I'm not. I'm genuinely worried. Michael and I both are. These past few days you've seemed scattered. The doctor's appointment you forgot to mention, now paranoia about break-ins. Maybe when you get home, we should talk about whether living alone is really the best idea. There it was. The accusation wrapped in concern. The setup for their ultimate goal, proving I was incompetent. I'll be home in 2.5 hours, I said, keeping my voice level. Don't touch anything in my house. Of course not. It's your home. A pause. We brought wine. I thought we could have a nice evening together, talk about the future. Michael has some ideas he wants to discuss with you. I ended the call without responding. My mind raced. If Rebecca was truly at the beach house, then who was in Portland? An accomplice? Someone she'd hired? The investigator's report had mentioned she worked alone in her previous cons, but maybe she'd adapted her methods. Or maybe she was lying. Maybe she'd recorded video of herself in my kitchen earlier, was showing Michael old footage while she ransacked my Portland house right now. I called Margaret back. Did you call the police? Yes, they're sending someone. But Dorothy, the woman just left. I watched her walk out the front door and drive away. A black Mercedes SUV. Black Mercedes. Rebecca drove a black Mercedes. Did you get the license plate? I'm sorry, I didn't think to look. It's okay, Margaret. Thank you. If she comes back, call 911 immediately. I will. And Dorothy? I'm worried about you. Maybe you should come home to Portland for a while. Being at that beach house all alone, everyone wanted me to give up. To come back to Portland, where they could watch me, control me, slowly strip away my independence. I'm fine, I said firmly, but I appreciate your concern. The rain intensified as I crossed into Pacific County. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael. Mom, seriously, when will you be home? We're starting to worry. I didn't respond. Instead, I called the one person I thought might help me. Cooper, Keller and Associates. I need to speak with Roy Cooper. It's Dorothy Norton. It's an emergency. I'm sorry. Mr. Cooper has left for the day. Please, tell him Rebecca is in my house. Tell him it's happening now. A pause. Hold, please. Cooper came on the line within seconds. Dorothy? What's happening? I explained everything. The call from Margaret, Rebecca's impossible claim to be at the beach house, Michael's texts. She's escalating, Cooper said grimly. Faster than I anticipated. Listen to me carefully. Do you have the documents I gave you? The investigator's report? Yes. In my car. Good. Don't take them into the house. Rebecca might search you, your purse, everything. Stop somewhere before you get home. A gas station, anywhere public with security cameras. Put those documents in your trunk, lock it, and keep your keys on you at all times. Okay. When you get home, act normal. Don't let her know you suspect anything. We need to buy time to get the evidence from your safe deposit box in Portland. That's the real proof. Her previous identities, the police reports, everything. Without it, we just have speculation. But she might have already gotten into the safe deposit box. If she has my keys, she'd need proper identification and authorization. Bank security is tight, but you're right to be concerned. First thing Monday morning, you need to get to that bank. That's 3 days away. I know. Can you hold on that long? Can you play the part of the unsuspecting mother-in-law? I thought about Thomas's letter, about his faith in my strength, my wisdom. Yes, I can do that. Good. Call me if anything changes. And Dorothy, don't eat or drink anything Rebecca prepares. I'm serious. The line went dead. Don't eat or drink anything. The implication hung in the air like poison gas. Did Cooper think Rebecca would actually try to drug me? Harm me directly? I stopped at a gas station 10 miles from Seabrook and did exactly as Cooper instructed. I locked the investigator's report and Thomas's letter in my trunk, keeping only my regular purse and phone. Then I sat in my car for 5 minutes, breathing deeply, preparing myself. I could do this. I had to. The beach house glowed with warm light when I pulled into the driveway at 7:30. Through the front window, I could see Michael setting the table while Rebecca moved around the kitchen. The perfect domestic scene. I grabbed my purse and walked to the front door, which opened before I could reach for the handle. Mom! Michael pulled me into a hug. We were getting worried. The roads must be terrible. They were challenging, I admitted, letting him take my coat. I'm sorry I didn't call more often. Rebecca appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. Her smile was radiant. Dorothy, I hope you don't mind us making ourselves at home. We wanted to surprise you. It's lovely, thank you. You must be exhausted. Sit down, dinner's almost ready. I made that lasagna you loved at Christmas. Had I loved it? I couldn't remember. But I smiled and nodded and let them fuss over me. The house felt different. Small things were out of place. A box pushed slightly to the left. A drawer not quite closed all the way. They'd been searching. Carefully but not carefully enough. So, Michael said as Rebecca brought out salad and bread, tell us about Seattle. What took you all the way up there? I'd prepared this answer during the drive. An old friend from Thomas's accounting days. She's in a nursing home now, and I wanted to visit. I should have mentioned it, but it was a last-minute decision. That's so sweet of you, Rebecca said, pouring wine into 3 glasses. What's her name? Maybe Thomas mentioned her to Michael. A test. She was already checking my story. Sylvia Henderson. She and her husband used to come to our house for Christmas Eve. A complete fabrication, but delivered smoothly. She has dementia now. Very sad. Rebecca nodded sympathetically and handed me a glass of wine. Well, you're a good friend to make that drive in this weather. I took the glass but didn't drink. Thank you, dear. Dinner was a careful dance. They asked questions. Casual, friendly questions that felt like interrogation. How was I settling into the beach house? Did I miss Portland? Had I made any friends in Seabrook? And then, as Rebecca served the lasagna, Michael cleared his throat. Mom, there's actually something we wanted to discuss with you. Rebecca and I have been talking, and we think it's time to address some practical matters. What kind of matters? Rebecca reached across the table, touching my hand. Dorothy, we love you, and we want to make sure you're taken care of. That's why we think it might be wise to set up a power of attorney, just as a precaution. Michael would handle your finances if anything ever happened, if you ever needed help. There it was, the real reason for their visit. I'm perfectly capable of handling my own finances, I said calmly. Of course you are. Michael rushed to assure me. It's just a safety net. Dad always said it was important to plan ahead. Did he? I set down my fork. When did your father say that? Michael blinked. I don't remember exactly, but he was always careful about these things. He was, I agreed. Very careful. He made sure everything was in order before he died. Rebecca's smile never wavered. Actually, Dorothy, we've been reviewing Thomas's arrangements, and there are some gaps. Some assets that aren't clearly documented. My heart rate spiked, but I kept my expression neutral. What assets? Well, we're not entirely sure. That's why we need to do a comprehensive review. Michael and I met with a financial advisor last week, and he suggested that we should have a complete picture of your holdings. For tax purposes, estate planning, that sort of thing. I see. I picked up my wine glass, pretended to take a sip, then set it down. And what did this advisor recommend? That you provide us with access to all your accounts. Bank statements, investment portfolios, property deeds, everything. It's standard practice for estate planning, especially at your age. At my age. The phrase dripped with condescension. I appreciate your concern, I said slowly, but I'm not comfortable giving anyone complete access to my financial information, even family. Michael's face fell. Mom, don't you trust us? Of course I trust you, sweetheart, but your father and I always kept our finances private. It's how we were raised. Rebecca's expression flickered, just for a second, a flash of something cold and calculating. Then the warm smile returned. I understand that generation's values, but things are different now. Families are more open, more collaborative. And honestly, Dorothy, Michael is your only child. Eventually, everything will be his anyway. Why not make the transition easier? Because I'm not dead yet, I said, more sharply than intended. Silence fell over the table. Michael looked stricken. Rebecca's smile finally faded. Of course not, Rebecca said softly. No one's suggesting. Dorothy, I think maybe you're misunderstanding. We're trying to help, not push you out of your own life. Then stop treating me like I'm incompetent. We're not. You are. I stood up, my legs shaking but my voice steady. Both of you. You show up unannounced, interrogate me about my day, pressure me to hand over control of my finances. This isn't help. This is manipulation. Mom. Michael stood as well. That's not fair. We're worried about you. You've been acting strange. The paranoia about break-ins, the secretive trip to Seattle. Now these accusations. Can't you see how concerning this is? What's concerning is my son showing up at my house and immediately trying to take control of my life. Rebecca remained seated, watching us both with an unreadable expression. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet, almost dangerous. Dorothy, I think you should know something. Michael and I stopped by your Portland house this afternoon. Before we came here, my blood turned to ice. You what? We were worried about you, and we wanted to check on the house, make sure everything was secure. She paused. We found some interesting things in Thomas's study, files he'd kept, files about me. The room spun. They had the files. They knew I'd been investigating. What files? I managed to ask. Rebecca smiled, a real smile this time, showing teeth. Background checks. Investigator reports. Thomas was a very thorough man. Paranoid, really. He hired someone to dig into my past, did you know that? Michael looked between us, confused. Rebecca, what are you talking about? Your father didn't trust me, Rebecca said, her eyes never leaving mine. He thought I was some kind of gold digger. He spent thousands of dollars trying to prove I was after your family's money. That's ridiculous, Michael said. Dad loved Rebecca. Did he? Rebecca turned to him. Then why did he hide assets from all of us? Why did he create secret trusts and offshore accounts? Why did he have me investigated like a criminal? Because you are a criminal, I said quietly. The words hung in the air like a gunshot. Rebecca's expression went completely blank. Then she laughed, a cold, brittle sound. Excuse me? Your real name is Rebecca Hartley. You're from Tacoma. Your father died in prison for fraud. You've done this before, at least 4 times, targeting families, marrying into them, stealing their assets. Michael stared at me, his face white. Mom, what are you saying? I'm saying your wife is a con artist, and your father knew it. Rebecca stood slowly, her movements deliberate. Those are serious accusations, Dorothy. Do you have proof? Or is this just the paranoid fantasy of a grieving widow who can't accept her son's happiness? I have proof. Thomas left me everything. Documentation, witness statements, your previous victims. Where? Rebecca's voice was sharp now, the mask finally slipping. Where is this so-called proof? Somewhere safe. Somewhere you'll never find it. Ladies, please. Michael held up his hands, his voice breaking. This is insane. Rebecca, tell her this is crazy. Tell her Dad was wrong. Rebecca ignored him, her focus entirely on me. "You're bluffing. If you had real proof, you'd have shown it already. You'd have told Michael weeks ago. I only found it today. Convenient." She moved around the table, slowly approaching me. "Here's what I think happened, Dorothy. I think you're confused, grief-stricken, maybe even suffering from early dementia. You've created this elaborate conspiracy in your mind because you can't stand the thought of Michael having a life separate from you. That's not true, isn't it? Think about how this looks. An elderly woman living alone, making wild accusations against her daughter-in-law, claiming her deceased husband left secret messages, seeing intruders where there are none." She turned to Michael. "This is exactly what I was afraid of. She needs help, professional help." Michael looked at me, his eyes full of pain and doubt. "Mom, maybe we should talk to your doctor, just to be safe." The betrayal cut deeper than any of Rebecca's lies. My own son, choosing to believe her over me. "Get out," I said quietly. "Mom, both of you, get out of my house, now." Rebecca gathered her purse with exaggerated slowness. "We'll go. But Michael, we need to talk to a lawyer. Your mother is clearly not capable of making sound decisions. For her own safety, we may need to pursue guardianship." The word landed like a physical blow. Guardianship. Legal control over my life, my assets, my very freedom. "Try it," I said, meeting Rebecca's eyes. "See what happens." They left, Michael casting one last anguished look back at me. I watched their car pull away, its taillights disappearing into the rain. Only then did I allow myself to collapse into a chair, my whole body shaking. They were going for guardianship. They'd found Thomas's files, knew I'd discovered the truth, and now they were moving to neutralize me before I could expose them. I had until Monday to get to the safe deposit box, to retrieve the real evidence and find a way to protect myself. But as I sat there in my violated home, I realized something terrifying. Rebecca hadn't eaten any of the lasagna. Neither had Michael. Only my plate had been served. Cooper's warning echoed in my mind. "Don't eat or drink anything Rebecca prepares." I looked at the untouched food on my plate, at the wine glass with its single fake sip, and I wondered what Rebecca had put in it that would have made her guardianship case so much easier to prove. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at Thomas's desk with every light in the house blazing, documenting everything. I wrote down dates, times, conversations. I photographed the untouched lasagna and wine glass, sealed them in plastic bags, and put them in my refrigerator. If Rebecca had drugged them, I'd need evidence. At 3 a.m, I called Roy Cooper's emergency number. "Dorothy?" His voice was groggy, but sharpened immediately. "What's wrong?" "They know. They found Thomas's files in Portland. And Rebecca threatened guardianship proceedings." Silence. Then, "Are you safe right now?" "Yes." "They left." "But Cooper, I think she tried to drug me. The food, don't touch it. Don't throw it away. We'll need it tested." I heard rustling, like he was getting out of bed. "Listen to me carefully. We're moving up the timeline. I'm driving to Portland first thing in the morning. I'll meet you at First National Bank when it opens at 9. We get into that safe deposit box and secure everything before Rebecca can make her next move. What if she's already gotten to it? She can't. Not without proper authorization and your key. But Dorothy, once we retrieve those documents, everything changes. Rebecca will know we have evidence that could destroy her. She'll either run or escalate. We need to be ready for both possibilities. What do I do until morning? Lock your doors. Keep your phone charged. If anyone tries to enter your house, call 911 immediately. And Dorothy? Pack a bag. After tomorrow, you might not be able to come back here for a while. The line went dead. I packed mechanically. Clothes, toiletries, important documents. My grandmother's recipe box with its hidden key. Thomas's photograph from our wedding day. The investigator's report from my trunk. Dawn came gray and cold. I was on the road by 6:30, driving through morning fog toward Portland. My hands ached from gripping the steering wheel too tightly, but I couldn't make them relax. Roy Cooper was waiting in the bank parking lot when I arrived at 8:45, sitting in a silver Lexus. He climbed out as I pulled up, dressed in a sharp suit despite the early hour, carrying a leather briefcase. "You look exhausted," he said by way of greeting. I didn't sleep. Neither did I. I spent the night making calls, preparing. If this goes the way I think it will, we'll need more than just documents. We'll need witnesses, legal backing, potentially law enforcement. He checked his watch. "Bank opens in 10 minutes. Do you have the key?" I pulled out my grandmother's recipe box and removed the small brass key taped behind the apple pie card, exactly where Thomas had said it would be. Such a simple thing. Such an ordinary hiding place. But it held the power to expose everything. We were the first customers through the door. The bank manager, a middle-aged woman named Patricia Holloway, recognized me immediately. "Mrs. Norton, it's been years. How can we help you today?" "I need to access my safe deposit box." "Of course. Let me just verify your identification and we'll get you right in." The process took 20 minutes, longer than I'd expected. My anxiety spiked with every passing minute. What if Rebecca showed up? What if she'd somehow gotten here first? But finally, Ms. Holloway led us into the vault, used her master key along with my key to open box 287, and placed the long metal container on the table in the private viewing room. "Take all the time you need," she said, closing the door behind her. Cooper and I stared at the box. Then, with shaking hands, I lifted the lid. Inside was everything Thomas had promised. Thick folders full of documents, photographs, legal records. But there was also something I hadn't expected. A DVD in a plastic case with a label in Thomas's handwriting. "For Dorothy. Watch this first." Cooper pulled out a laptop from his briefcase. "Do you want me to preview it?" "No, I need to see it." He loaded the disc. After a moment, Thomas's face appeared on the screen, sitting in his study in our Portland house, wearing his favorite cardigan. The date stamp in the corner showed it was recorded 2 years before he died. "Hello, my darling." His voice cracked through the speakers, and my eyes immediately filled with tears. "If you're watching this, then I'm gone, and you've found the safe deposit box. I'm so sorry, Dorothy. Sorry for the secrets. Sorry for the deception. Sorry for leaving you to deal with this alone." He leaned forward, his expression grave. "By now you know about Rebecca, about what she is. I hired the investigator 8 years ago, and what he found terrified me. But I couldn't tell you because I knew you'd want to tell Michael, and I couldn't risk that. Rebecca is dangerous, not physically, at least I don't think so, but she's a predator. She targets families like ours, extracts everything she can, and disappears." Thomas rubbed his face, suddenly looking much older than I remembered. The investigator found 4 previous instances. In California, she married a man named David Berkeley, convinced him to put all his assets in a joint trust, then disappeared with $800,000. In Arizona, she was engaged to Robert Walsh. That relationship ended when his mother grew suspicious and hired her own investigator. Rebecca vanished before they could press charges. He pulled out a folder and held it up to the camera. "This contains everything: her real identity, her criminal history, statements from previous victims. Enough to send her to prison if properly prosecuted. But here's what you need to understand, Dorothy. Rebecca doesn't work alone anymore. She's evolved. The investigator discovered that she's part of a network. 3 other women running similar cons across the western states. They share information, techniques, even identities. If you expose Rebecca, you expose all of them." My blood ran cold. A network. This was bigger than I'd imagined. "I've been documenting everything," Thomas continued. "Her spending patterns, her lies, the way she manipulates Michael. I've also been in contact with the FBI's white-collar crime division. Agent Brenda Simmons, her card is in the box. She's been investigating this network for 2 years. He paused, his eyes glistening. "I wanted to live long enough to see this through, to protect you and Michael from her. But if you're watching this, I didn't make it. So now it's up to you." Thomas leaned closer to the camera. "You're the strongest person I've ever known, Dorothy. Don't let Rebecca convince you otherwise. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Use these documents. Call Agent Simmons. Protect yourself and our son, even if he can't see what's happening." He smiled. That warm, familiar smile that I'd fallen in love with 45 years ago. I love you, Dorothy. Always have, always will. Be brave, my darling. And remember, you're not alone in this fight. The screen went black. I sat there, tears streaming down my face, while Cooper respectfully pretended to study the documents. Finally, I wiped my eyes and reached into the box, pulling out the thick folders. Inside was everything Thomas had promised. Financial records showing Rebecca's spending patterns, thousands of dollars charged to Michael's credit cards for things that didn't exist, photographs of her meeting with 2 other women, presumably her accomplices, phone records showing calls to numbers associated with her previous identities, and then, at the bottom of the box, a business card. FBI Special Agent Brenda Simmons, White Collar Crime Division. Cooper looked at the card, then at me. Thomas was working with the FBI? Apparently, for 2 years before he died. Then we need to call her. Now. This is bigger than just protecting you. This is a federal investigation. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and dialed the number. Agent Simmons. The voice was professional, clipped. My name is Dorothy Norton. My late husband, Thomas Norton, was in contact with you about an investigation involving Rebecca Hartley. A sharp intake of breath. Mrs. Norton, I've been waiting for your call. Where are you right now? First National Bank in Portland. I'm with Thomas's attorney, Roy Cooper. Stay there. Don't leave. Don't talk to anyone. I'm 20 minutes away. She hung up before I could respond. Cooper and I waited in tense silence. Bank customers came and went. Ms. Holloway checked on us twice, clearly curious about the FBI agent I'd mentioned to the receptionist. Agent Simmons arrived in exactly 18 minutes. A woman in her late 30s with sharp eyes and an air of contained energy. She flashed her badge at the bank manager and was ushered immediately into our private room. Mrs. Norton, Mr. Cooper. She closed the door firmly. I need to see everything Thomas left you. We spread it all out on the table. She photographed every page with ruthless efficiency, her expression growing grimmer with each document. This is excellent, she finally said. Thomas compiled evidence we've been trying to gather for months. Combined with what we already have, this is enough to arrest Rebecca and potentially her entire network. When? I asked. Today. As soon as we can coordinate with local law enforcement. She looked at me directly. But I need to warn you, Mrs. Norton. Once we move, Rebecca will know. If she has any way to contact her associates, they'll scatter. We need to move fast, and we need to move simultaneously. What do you need from me? I need you to call her. Tell her you want to meet somewhere public, somewhere we can have agents in place. Tell her you're ready to discuss the guardianship arrangement, that you've reconsidered. My stomach turned. You want me to bait her. I want you to help us catch her. This woman has stolen millions of dollars from families like yours. She's left a trail of financial devastation and broken lives. You have a chance to stop her. I looked at Cooper. He nodded slowly. It's your decision, Dorothy. But Agent Simmons is right. This might be the only way to protect not just yourself, but everyone else Rebecca might target in the future. I thought about Thomas, secretly working with the FBI for 2 years. About the beach house he'd hidden to protect me. About the sacrifices he'd made that I'd never known about. He'd been brave. Now it was my turn. What do I say? Agent Simmons pulled out her phone. We'll script it carefully. And Mrs. Norton? You won't be alone. We'll have agents everywhere, watching your back every second. 20 minutes later, I made the call. Rebecca answered on the second ring. Dorothy, I didn't expect to hear from you. I want to talk. About what you said last night. About the guardianship. A pause. I'm listening. Not over the phone. Can you meet me? Today? Where? The Riverside restaurant. The one by the waterfront. 1 o'clock. I could hear the calculation in her silence. A public place, lots of witnesses. She'd think I'd chosen it for safety, which was partly true. I'll be there, she said finally. Should I bring Michael? No, just you and me. We need to talk, woman to woman. All right, 1 o'clock. She paused. Dorothy, I'm glad you're being reasonable about this. Everything will be so much easier now. After she hung up, Agent Simmons nodded in satisfaction. Perfect. That gives us 4 hours to set up. Cooper, I'll need you there as well. As Dorothy's attorney, you have a legitimate reason to be present. What about Michael? I asked. My son. He has no idea what Rebecca really is. We'll handle that carefully. After we have Rebecca in custody, we'll bring him in for questioning. He might be complicit, or he might be another victim. We'll determine that during the investigation. He's not complicit, I said firmly. He's been manipulated, just like I was. Then we'll prove that. But first, let's focus on Rebecca. The next 4 hours felt both endless and impossibly short. Agent Simmons briefed her team, at least a dozen agents who would be stationed throughout the restaurant and surrounding area. Cooper went over my talking points, practicing exactly what I should say to keep Rebecca engaged until they had what they needed. She'll try to get you to sign something, he warned. Power of attorney papers, possibly. Don't sign anything, no matter what she says. I won't. At 12:30, we drove to the Riverside Restaurant, a upscale establishment on the Willamette River, popular for business lunches. Agent Simmons had reserved a table by the window, with clear sightlines from multiple positions. I arrived first, my legs shaking as I walked through the door. Agents were everywhere, disguised as diners, waitstaff, even a couple having an intimate lunch at the next table. But Rebecca wouldn't notice. She'd be too focused on me. At precisely 1 o'clock, she walked in. She looked impeccable. Designer dress, perfect hair, that practiced smile. She spotted me immediately and glided over, leaning down to kiss my cheek. Dorothy, thank you for calling. I was so worried after last night. Please, sit. She settled into her chair, ordering sparkling water when the waitress appeared. Always in control, always playing the part. So, she said, folding her hands on the table, you wanted to talk about the guardianship. I wanted to talk about Thomas. Her smile faltered slightly. Thomas? My husband. The man who spent the last years of his life investigating you. The mask slipped. Just for a second, I saw the real Rebecca, cold, calculating, dangerous. I don't know what you mean. Yes, you do. I pulled out my phone and set it on the table between us. On the screen was a photograph from Thomas's files. Rebecca, with different hair, a different name, standing next to a man in California. David Berkeley, her first victim. Rebecca stared at the photo. Her face went very pale. Where did you get that? Thomas left me everything. Every document, every photograph, every piece of evidence he collected. And this morning, I gave it all to the FBI. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Other diners looked over. Agent Simmons, sitting 3 tables away, tensed. You're bluffing. Am I? I pulled out another photo. Rebecca in Arizona with Robert Walsh. That's not all. I also have bank records, phone logs, witness statements from your previous victims. Thomas worked with the FBI for 2 years building a case against you. You're done, Rebecca. Or should I call you by one of your other names? Her hand moved to her purse. 2 agents stood simultaneously, hands moving to their weapons. She froze. Rebecca Hartley, Agent Simmons said, approaching our table with her badge held high. You're under arrest for wire fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit theft. Put your hands on the table where I can see them. The restaurant went silent. Everyone stared as 2 more agents moved in, as handcuffs clicked around Rebecca's wrists. She looked at me with pure hatred. You'll regret this. Michael will never forgive you. Maybe not, I said quietly, but at least he'll be safe from you. As they led her away, Cooper appeared at my side, squeezing my shoulder. You did it. It's over. But I knew it wasn't really over. The legal battle was just beginning. Michael would be devastated, angry, disbelieving. There would be trials and testimony and painful revelations. But for the first time in days, I could breathe. The predator who'd invaded my life had been caught. The trap Thomas had laid years ago had finally closed. I'd been brave, just like he'd asked, and I'd won. The weeks following Rebecca's arrest blurred together in a haze of legal proceedings, FBI interviews, and painful conversations. Agent Simmons kept me informed of every development. Rebecca had been charged with multiple counts of fraud across 3 states. Her network of accomplices, 3 other women running similar schemes, had been arrested within 48 hours of her takedown. The total damage, across all their victims over the past decade, exceeded $8 million. But the legal victory felt hollow every time I thought about Michael. He hadn't spoken to me since Rebecca's arrest. I'd called, texted, even driven to his Lake Oswego house only to find it dark and empty. Agent Simmons told me he was cooperating with the investigation, that he'd been cleared of any criminal involvement. He truly had been another victim, manipulated and deceived just like me. But that didn't mean he'd forgiven me for exposing her. It was late May, almost 6 weeks after that day at the Riverside restaurant, when I finally got the call I'd been waiting for. "Mom!" Michael's voice was rough, like he'd been crying. Or hadn't slept. Probably both. "Michael, sweetheart, I've been so worried. Can I come see you? At the beach house?" My heart clenched. "Of course. When?" "Now. I'm already halfway there." He arrived 2 hours later, just as the afternoon sun broke through the perpetual coastal clouds. I watched from the window as he climbed out of his car, moving slowly, like a man who'd aged years in just weeks. I had coffee ready when he knocked. He took the offered mug but didn't drink, just held it between his hands like he needed something to anchor him. "The FBI showed me everything," he said finally, staring out at the ocean. "The files Dad kept, the evidence, her previous victims." He laughed bitterly. "They showed me surveillance footage from 2 years ago. Rebecca meeting with those other women, planning their cons. I was engaged to her already. We'd set a wedding date. Michael, I loved her, Mom. Or I thought I did. I don't even know anymore what was real and what was an act." He finally looked at me, his eyes red-rimmed. How did I not see it? How was I so blind? Because she was good at what she did. Because you trusted her, and trust makes us vulnerable. I set down my own coffee and reached for his hand. "This isn't your fault, isn't it? Dad saw through her immediately. He knew something was wrong. And you figured it out in days. But I spent 5 years with her and never suspected a thing. Your father had 42 years of experience reading people. I had 70 years of life teaching me when something felt wrong. You're 34, Michael. You're allowed to be trusting. That's not a weakness." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I'm so sorry, Mom, for everything I said, everything I believed, the way I doubted you, questioned your competence, sided with her against you. You were manipulated. That's not an excuse. You're my mother. I should have trusted you." His voice cracked. "She had me convinced you were losing it, that you needed to be protected from yourself. And I believed her because it was easier than accepting that my wife might be lying to me." I squeezed his hand. "What matters is that you know the truth now. The FBI agent Reeves, she told me about the beach house, about how Dad bought it in secret, how he set everything up to protect you, even after he died." Michael shook his head in wonder. "He loved you so much. And I almost let Rebecca destroy everything he worked to preserve. But you didn't. We stopped her. You stopped her. Dad stopped her. I just stood in the way." "No." I said it firmly, pulling his attention back to me. "You were another victim in this, Michael. Not a villain. Rebecca targeted our family, and she was very good at what she did. But she underestimated something." "What?" "She underestimated how much your father loved us. And she underestimated me." I allowed myself a small smile. She thought I was just a grieving old widow who could be easily manipulated. She didn't realize that 70 years of life had taught me to recognize predators. Michael looked around the beach house, at Thomas's painting on the wall, at my grandmother's dishes in the cabinet, at all the small touches I'd added to make this place home. "This is nice," he said quietly. "Peaceful. I can see why you wanted it. Would you like to stay for dinner? Nothing fancy, just soup and bread. But I'd like the company." He nodded, and for the first time in weeks, he smiled. "I'd like that." We spent the evening talking, really talking, in a way we hadn't since he'd married Rebecca. He told me about the house he'd sold, the job he was taking a leave from, the therapy he'd started. I told him about my quiet days at the beach, about the books I'd been reading, about the elderly neighbor down the shore who'd invited me to her weekly card game. As the sun set over the Pacific, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Michael asked the question I'd been waiting for. "What happens now, Mom? With everything?" "Well, Rebecca's trial is set for September. Agent Simmons says with all the evidence we have, she'll likely plead guilty and take a deal. 20 years minimum." "I meant with us, with you and me." I considered carefully. "That's up to you, sweetheart. I'm not going anywhere. I'll be right here whenever you're ready to rebuild our relationship." "I'm ready now," he said. "If you'll let me. Always." He stayed that night, sleeping in the guest room. In the morning, I made him breakfast. Pancakes, his favorite since childhood, and we ate on the deck overlooking the beach. "I need to tell you something," Michael said, drowning his pancakes in syrup just like he always had. "The FBI told me about Dad's investigation, about how he'd been documenting everything for years, building a case, and I was angry at first, you know? Angry that he'd kept secrets, that he'd hidden things from both of us. I was angry too," I admitted. But then Agent Simmons showed me his final report, the one he filed with them 3 months before he died. And at the end, he wrote something. Michael pulled out his phone, scrolling through emails. "She sent me a copy. It says, 'My greatest fear is that I won't live long enough to protect my family from this threat. But my greatest hope is that I've taught my wife enough, loved her well enough, that she'll be able to protect herself. Dorothy is the strongest person I've ever known. If I'm gone, she'll figure this out. I have complete faith in her.'" My eyes filled with tears. He wrote that 3 months before his heart attack. He knew, Mom. He knew you'd figure it out, that you'd be strong enough to handle whatever came. Michael reached across the table, taking my hand. And he was right. You were incredible. You stayed calm, gathered evidence, worked with the FBI, and took down an entire criminal network. All while grieving Dad, dealing with my betrayal, and being threatened with guardianship. I had help. Your father left me a roadmap. But you had to follow it. You had to be brave enough to walk into danger, smart enough to outthink Rebecca, and patient enough to let the trap close at the right moment. He squeezed my hand. "I'm proud of you, Mom. And I'm sorry I ever doubted you." Over the following weeks, Michael became a regular visitor. He'd drive down on weekends, helping me with projects around the house. We installed a new deck railing together. He taught me how to use the streaming service on my TV. I taught him my mother's recipe for clam chowder. Slowly, painfully, we rebuilt what Rebecca had tried to destroy. In July, Roy Cooper called with news. The Coastal Realty Trust Corporation, the shell company Thomas created, has been dissolved. The beach house is now in your name. Clear title, no complications. "And Dorothy?" "I've been going through Thomas's other accounts. He had life insurance you didn't know about, investments set aside. Your financial situation is more secure than you realized." "Thomas," I murmured. "Always planning, always protecting. He was a good man, and he chose a remarkable woman to share his life with." After hanging up, I walked down to the beach, my feet sinking into cool sand. The summer sun was warm on my face. Gulls wheeled overhead, and the Pacific stretched out endlessly before me. I thought about Thomas, about the secrets he'd kept, and the love that motivated them, about Rebecca and her network of lies, about Michael and the long road back to trust. But mostly I thought about myself, about the woman I'd been 6 months ago, comfortable, complacent, letting others make decisions because it was easier than asserting myself, and about the woman I'd become, someone who'd faced down a predator and won, who'd trusted her own instincts, who'd refused to be dismissed or diminished. 70 years old, and I'd finally learned the most important lesson. That age wasn't about decline. It was about accumulation. Accumulation of wisdom, of experience, of hard-won knowledge about people in the world. Rebecca had looked at me and seen an easy mark, an elderly widow, vulnerable and confused. She'd never imagined that 70 years of life had taught me to recognize lies, to trust my gut, to fight for what mattered. She'd underestimated me. They all had. But I'd never underestimate myself again. In September, I attended Rebecca's sentencing. Michael came with me, sitting beside me in the courtroom as the judge handed down 25 years. Rebecca didn't look at either of us, just stared straight ahead as they led her away. The other 3 women in her network received similar sentences. Agent Simmons told me later that they'd recovered over $3 million in stolen assets, returned money to victims who'd given up hope of ever seeing justice. "You did this," she said, shaking my hand after the sentencing. "Your testimony, the evidence Thomas gathered, your willingness to help us set the trap. You saved a lot of people from becoming victims. I just did what needed to be done. That's what heroes always say." She smiled. "Thomas was right about you, Mrs. Norton. You're stronger than you know." October brought the first storms of fall, and with them, a sense of completion. Michael had moved back to Portland, into a smaller apartment, and was slowly rebuilding his life. He called every evening, sometimes just to chat about his day, sometimes to ask advice about decisions he was facing. We were healing, both of us. One gray afternoon, I stood in my living room arranging flowers, bright orange and yellow mums from the local farmer's market, when I noticed Thomas's painting of Mount Hood, the one that had hung in our Portland home for decades, the one I'd insisted the movers bring here. In the painting, the mountain stood eternal and snow-capped against a blue sky, unchanging, steadfast, strong, like Thomas had been, like I'd discovered I could be. I thought about my Portland house, sitting empty now. Michael had asked if I wanted to sell it, to simplify my life, but I'd decided to keep it. Not because I needed it, but because I chose to. Because I could manage 2 properties, could drive between the coast and the city, could maintain independence even at 70. The beach house had been Thomas's gift, his way of ensuring I'd have safety and security. But what I'd built here, the life, the peace, the hard-won confidence, that was mine. I'd earned it. As evening fell, I made tea and settled into the armchair by the window, watching the tide roll in. Tomorrow, Michael would visit with news about his new job. Next week, my neighbor Agnes was teaching me to knit. In December, my sister Patricia was coming from Spokane for Christmas. Life continued, not in spite of everything that had happened, but because of it. The mystery had been solved, the danger vanquished, the truth revealed. And I was still here, still standing, still strong. The beach house, this place I'd bought for solitude and peace, had become something else entirely. It had become the testing ground where I'd proven to myself what Thomas had always known. That age wasn't about becoming less. It was about becoming more distilled, more essential, more truly yourself. I was 70 years old. I'd buried a husband I loved. I'd exposed a criminal network. I'd reclaimed my relationship with my son. I'd learned to trust myself above all others. And I'd discovered that the best inheritance Thomas could have left me wasn't money or property. It was the absolute faith that I could handle whatever came next. As darkness settled over the ocean and the lighthouse in the distance began its steady rotation, I raised my teacup in a silent toast. To Thomas, who'd loved me enough to believe in me. To Michael, who'd found his way back. To myself, for being brave enough to fight when it mattered. And to the future, uncertain, yes, but no longer frightening. Because I'd learned the secret that only 70 years can teach you. That wisdom isn't about knowing everything. It's about trusting that you can figure out anything. The beach house stood solid around me, a sanctuary I'd claimed and defended. Outside, the Pacific roared its eternal song. Inside, I sat warm and safe and content, a woman who'd faced her demons and won, not with weapons, not with force, but with patience, intelligence, and the quiet power that comes from refusing to be dismissed. I'd spent 70 years becoming who I was meant to be, and I wasn't finished yet. Not by a long shot. The tide came in, the tide went out, and I remained, steadfast as the beach house itself, unshakable as the mountains Thomas had loved to paint. The mystery was solved, but the story wasn't over. It was just beginning. Now tell me, what would you have done if you were in my place? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to check out the video on your screen right now. I'm sure it will surprise you.